Daniel Carter woke up at 5:30. Every morning like he had done for the past 6 months since. Finding her, the sun had not yet risen over the Oregon coast when he packed his small cooler with fresh salmon from the market, some apples, and leftover chicken from last night's dinner. His apartment was small and quiet. The kind of place where a man could think without interruption. He worked as a maintenance worker at the state park near the cliffs. A job that paid enough for rent and food with a little left over. Most people thought his life was simple and maybe boring. But Daniel liked it that way. He drove his old truck down the coastal road, watching the gray morning sky begin to turn purple at the edges. The park would not open for another 3 hours, which gave him plenty of time for his morning visit 6 months ago. He'd been checking the old cave systems along the beach for storm damage when he heard a sound like breathing. Deep and slow, what he found in the largest cave made him freeze in place. A creature lay curled against the back wall. Scales that might have once been gold, but now looked faded and dull. She was huge, easily the size of his truck, with wings folded against her sides that had tears in the thin membrane between the bones. Her head lifted when she sensed him, and eyes that glowed like old amber fixed on his face. Daniel should have run. He should have called someone, the police or maybe animal control. Instead, he noticed how thin she looked, how her ribs showed through her scales, how she moved like every breath hurt. She reminded him of the old dog he had found as a kid. The one everyone said was too far gone to save, but he had tried anyway. That dog lived another 5 good years. The creature watched him back away slowly, not threatening. Just tired. Daniel went home that day and could not stop thinking about her the next morning. He brought fish. She did not eat it while he watched, but when he returned the following day, the fish was gone. This became his routine every morning before work. He brought food at first. She would not eat until he left. But after a few weeks, she began eating while he sat near the cave entrance. He started talking to her, feeling foolish at first, but the cave was quiet and she seemed to listen. He told her about his day, about the tourists who left trash everywhere, about the seals that played in the surf. Sometimes he read to her from the books he borrowed from the library, mostly adventure stories and nature guides. After 3 months, she made a sound that was not quite a purr, but close enough. Eyes seemed brighter, and she moved with less pain. Daniel started researching large reptile care online, trying to figure out what she needed. The websites about lizards and snakes were not exactly helpful when dealing with something the size of a car. But he learned about temperature regulation and dietary needs. He brought warming blankets that he plugged into a small generator he hauled into the cave. She allowed him to drape them over her back. And that night he heard her make that almost purring sound again. His co-workers at the park thought he was eccentric. Still feeding your big lizard, they would joke. Daniel never corrected them, never explained that she was so much more than a lizard. There was an intelligence in those amber eyes, an awareness that made him certain she understood him when he spoke. He worried about her constantly. What if poachers found her? What if she got sick? And he could not help. What if she was the last of her kind, and he was watching her slowly die despite his best efforts? These thoughts kept him awake some nights. This particular morning was special because he had managed to get fresh tuna from the dock, the kind that cost him more than he usually spent. But her favorite fish was tuna. He parked his truck in the maintenance area and carried the cooler down the rocky path to her cave. Sun was just starting to paint the sky pink and orange. Morning. Old girl, he called softly as he approached. She lifted her head immediately, recognizing his voice and footsteps. Daniel smiled despite the chill in the air. She looked stronger today, her eyes more alert. He unpacked the tuna and set it on the flat rock he used as her feeding station, then added the apples and chicken around it. Got you something special today, he said, settling onto his usual spot on a smaller boulder near the entrance. The fisherman at the dock said this tuna was caught fresh yesterday morning. Still had the ocean cold in it when I bought it. She moved toward the food with more grace than she had shown in weeks. Her claws clicked on the stone floor of the cave. Daniel watched her eat. Noting how much better her appetite had become, when she finished, she moved closer to him than usual. Close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her scales. He reached out slowly. Telegraphing his movement, she had let him touch her a few times before. But he never took it for granted. His hand settled on her snout, and the scales felt smooth and warm under his palm. "You are doing so much better," he said quietly. "When I first found you, I thought maybe I would just be here to make sure you were not alone at the end. But look at you now. You are getting stronger every day." She made that rumbling sound again, and he could swear she was pleased. What Daniel did not know, could not know, was that he was not alone in the cave, hidden by technology far beyond human understanding. A group of observers watched his every move. They had been watching for 6 months, recording everything, debating among themselves what to do. Some were insectoid, with multiple eyes that tracked Daniel's movements. Others were reptilian, their scales patterned in colors. Earth had no names for all of them, wore what could only be described as formal business attire. Though the styles were alien, at the center of their group stood Vex, whose species had no direct translation in human language, but whose role was clear. He was a lawyer. Beside him was Commander Duran, head of security, whose hand never strayed far from weapons Daniel could not see. They watched as Daniel pulled out a thermos and poured himself coffee, sipping it while he told the dragon about a baby seal he had seen learning to swim yesterday. "He continues to show no awareness of her importance," Vex said, his translator rendering the clicking sounds into words his colleagues could understand. "No attempt to exploit. No recognition of her value." Commander Duran crossed his arms, which given his species involved folding 4 limbs rather than 2. "The matriarch has shown more improvement in these 6 months than in the previous 2 years combined. His presence is beneficial. The assembly will not see it that way," another observer said. "They will claim she has lost her capacity to reason if she continues to accept charity from a primitive." "He does not see it as charity," Vex observed. "Watch how he speaks to her. He believes he has found a friend," on their screens. Daniel was now reading from a book about ocean currents, his voice steady and warm. The dragon they called Matriarch Keshrith, former supreme arbitrator of the Galactic Council, rested her head near his feet and closed her eyes. "This cannot continue indefinitely," Commander Duran said. "Chancellor Vorn has filed the competency challenge. They will arrive within the week to assess her, and when they see this," Vex gestured at the screen showing the peaceful scene, "they will declare her unfit. Then we must prepare," another voice said. "The matriarch chose him, and we are bound to honor her choices, even if those choices seem inexplicable," Vex said in the screen. Daniel checked his watch and stood reluctantly. "I have got to get to work," he told the dragon, "but I will be back tonight after my shift. I am thinking about bringing some of those mangoes you seemed to like last time." He gathered his things, gave her scales one last gentle pat, and walked back up the path to his truck. The observers watched him go, then turned their attention back to the dragon. She watched the cave entrance long after Daniel disappeared. And for the first time in centuries, Matriarch Keshrith felt something she thought she had lost forever: hope. Matriarch Keshrith had not always lived in a cave on a backwater planet at the edge of explored space for 800 years. She had served as supreme arbitrator of the Galactic Council, mediating disputes between species that could have torn the assembly apart. She had prevented 17 wars, negotiated 43 territorial agreements, and personally intervened in countless conflicts that history would never record. The weight of those centuries pressed on her like gravity from 1,000 worlds. Every decision she made affected billions of lives, sometimes trillions. Every word she spoke was analyzed by diplomats and politicians. Looking for advantage, she could not rest without security briefings, could not eat without tasters checking her food, could not have a single moment that belonged only to herself. 3 years ago, she began to feel the exhaustion in her bones, not the tiredness that came from a long day, but a deeper weariness that sleep could not touch. Her scales began to fade, her wings grew heavy, and she found herself struggling to care about matters that once consumed her. Council physicians examined her with their advanced equipment and found nothing physically wrong, but Keshrith knew the truth. She was tired of the burden of importance when she announced her retirement. The political shockwaves rippled across the galaxy. Dozens of species jockeyed for position to replace her, each seeing her departure as an opportunity. Her estate, accumulated over centuries of service, became the subject of intense scrutiny. Various factions tried to curry favor, offering her luxury retirement on paradise worlds. She refused them all. What she wanted, what she desperately needed, was to be left alone. She wanted to die in peace, away from the politics and maneuvering that had consumed her life. Her legal team, headed by Vex, who had served her for 200 years, worked to arrange her final wishes. They searched for remote locations where she could live out her remaining time without interference. Earth was perfect. The humans had not yet been contacted officially, though the Assembly had been observing them for decades. They were violent and chaotic, but showed potential for eventual integration into galactic society. More importantly, they had no context for identifying alien species on Earth. Keshrith would be just another strange creature in a world full of strange creatures. 6 months ago, she arrived at the Oregon coast with her security detail and legal team. They established cloaking fields around the cave system, set up monitoring equipment, and prepared to watch her die. The first few weeks were difficult. Kesith felt the pull of darkness, the desire to simply stop fighting. She had lived long enough, done enough, and was so very tired. Then Daniel found her at first. She planned to ignore him, hoping he would leave and forget about her, but he kept coming back. He brought food and water, speaking to her in soft tones that required no response. His language was primitive, and he had no idea what she was. But something in his voice carried genuine concern. She told herself she was only accepting his offerings because refusing would draw more attention. But the truth was more complicated. Daniel treated her with kindness that expected nothing in return. He did not want political favors or access to her wealth. He did not see the Supreme Arbitrator or the Matriarch or any of the titles she had carried. He saw a creature in pain and wanted to help it. Had been centuries since anyone treated her that way in the monitoring station hidden among the rocks. Her team watched with growing concern. Her vital signs are stabilizing, Dr. Kelm reported, his multiple eyes scanning the medical readouts. Muscle tone is improving. Neural activity shows increased engagement. The human's visits correlate directly with these improvements, Vex noted, pulling up charts on his datapad every time he arrives. Her stress hormones decrease, and her system begins normal regulatory functions. Commander Duran watched the live feed showing Daniel reading to Keshrith from a book about whales. This is unprecedented. We prepared for end-of-life care, not recovery. Should we intervene? Asked Lieutenant Mora, one of the junior security officers. The matriarch specifically requested no interference. Vex said firmly, her will states that we are to observe and protect but not interact unless she summons us. But this human has no idea what he is dealing with. Mora protested. He could inadvertently harm her. Look at the scans. Dr. Kelm said, he is not harming her, quite the opposite. His presence appears to be therapeutic. Commander Duran frowned, which given his facial structure involved several disturbing muscle movements. This complicates matters significantly. Chancellor Vorn has already begun his challenge. The mere mention of Chancellor Vaughan's name caused tension in the room. Vern was a career politician who had spent decades trying to undermine Keshereth's authority now that she was retired and vulnerable. He saw his opportunity. His legal team had filed a competency challenge with the Assembly, claiming that Keshereth was no longer capable of managing her own affairs. If successful, he would gain control of her estate, and more importantly, her political influence. The evidence he planned to present was damning from a galactic perspective. The former supreme arbitrator living in a cave, accepting charity from a primitive species, showing no interest in maintaining her status. When will Vaughan arrive? Vex asked. 3 days, Commander Jiren replied. He has secured emergency assessment authority from the Assembly. We cannot refuse him access. The matriarch will not appreciate the intrusion, the Archelm said quietly. She came here to escape exactly this kind of political maneuvering. Vex watched the screen where Daniel was now showing Keshereth pictures on his primitive communication device, explaining something about his co-workers. We need to prepare her. She must understand what is coming. She has been avoiding our communication requests for weeks. Commander Jiren said. She knows we are here but chooses to pretend otherwise. Then we must respect her choice until Vaughan forces the issue. Vex decided. Continue monitoring. Document everything. We will need evidence of her mental competency. The team returned to their duties. But the worry was evident. They had served Keshereth for decades, some for centuries. They knew her moods, her patterns, her capabilities. What they were seeing now was not diminished capacity. It was something more complex. She had chosen this strange existence with this primitive human, and that choice itself demonstrated the independence of mind they needed to prove. But would the Assembly see it that way that evening? Daniel returned as promised with mangoes. Keshereth ate them delicately, clearly enjoying the sweet fruit. You know, Daniel said, settling into his usual spot. I have been thinking about getting you some kind of heater for the cave. The weather forecast says a storm is coming next week, and I worry about you getting cold. He pulled out his phone to show her the weather app. Pointing at the screen, see these clouds. They mean rain, probably lots of it. And I know you have got those scales, but I still worry. Keshereth made the rumbling sound that Daniel had learned meant contentment in the monitoring station. Vex made a note in his files. Subject shows clear communication with human. Demonstrates understanding of weather patterns and acceptance of offered comfort measures. This indicates intact cognitive function and reasoning ability. But he knew it would not be enough for Vaughan. Chancellor would argue that accepting help from a primitive was itself evidence of impairment. They would need something more. Something that proved beyond doubt that Keshereth was making informed choices. Commander, Vex said slowly. An idea forming. What are the protocols for first contact scenarios? Jiren looked up sharply. You cannot be serious. Earth is not scheduled for official contact for another 15 years at minimum. But if circumstances force the issue, Vex pressed. If the human becomes aware of galactic civilization through no fault of ours, then protocols allow for limited disclosure. Jiren admitted reluctantly, but the Council will not be pleased. The Council can lodge their complaints after we save the matriarch's independence. Vex said on the screen. Daniel was tucking a blanket around Keshereth, treating her with the care someone might show a beloved pet. Neither the human nor the dragon knew that their quiet friendship was about to collide with galactic politics. Neither knew that in 3 days everything would change. But in that moment, in the cave with the sound of the ocean outside, Keshereth felt something she had not felt in years. Peace. The storm Daniel worried about arrived 2 days early, with winds that bent the coastal trees and rain that turned the beach paths into rivers of mud. Daniel called in sick to work, something he rarely did because he could not stop thinking about her alone in the cave. He loaded his truck with extra blankets, battery-powered heaters, and enough food for several days in case the roads became impassable. The drive to the park took twice as long as usual, his windshield wipers barely keeping up with the downpour when he finally reached the maintenance area. He saw something that made his heart stop. Lights. Dozens of lights near the cave entrance, glowing through the rain like earthbound stars. His first thought was poachers. Then maybe government agents. Then he stopped trying to guess and just ran the rain soaked through his jacket immediately. But he did not care. He had to make sure she was safe. What he found when he reached the cave made his mind struggle to process reality. The lights came from equipment he did not recognize. All angles and smooth surfaces that seemed to absorb the rain rather than shed it. But that was not the shocking part. The shocking part was the people, except they were not people. One stood nearly 8 feet tall, with 4 arms and scales that shifted colors in the strange light. Another was shorter but wider, with what looked like insect features and too many eyes. There were others, maybe a dozen in total, all clearly not human, all wearing clothes that looked like business suits designed by someone who had never seen a business suit. They surrounded the cave entrance in a loose semicircle, and in the center of that semicircle stood a being that radiated authority despite looking like a cross between a lizard and a bear. Chancellor Vorn. Though Daniel had no way of knowing that name yet, behind them all, deeper in the cave, Daniel could see her. She stood at her full height, wings partially spread, placing herself between him and the assembled aliens. Her posture was protective. "What is this?" Daniel heard himself say, his voice barely audible over the storm. "What are you doing to her?" The tall scale being turned to look at him, and Daniel found himself staring into eyes that held more intelligence and calculation than he had ever seen. "The human," the being said, and somehow Daniel understood the words despite them coming from a mouth that should not be able to form human speech. "How convenient. We have questions about your involvement with this individual." "My involvement," Daniel repeated, still trying to make sense of the scene. "I feed her, I check on her, I make sure she is okay." "What is this about?" "You feed her," the bear lizard creature said, its tone dripping with something that might have been contempt. "Do you understand what she is? What you have been feeding?" "She's hurt," Daniel said, feeling anger cut through his confusion. "She needed help." "I do not care what she is." The tall being, Commander Jiren, though Daniel did not know this yet, stepped forward. His 4 arms were positioned in a way that suggested he was trying to appear non-threatening, though the weapons visible on his belt somewhat undermined that effort. "Mr. Carter," Jiren said, "my name is Commander Zieren. These are my associates. We need to speak with you about your interactions with Matriarch Keshereth." "Matriarch," Daniel said. The title felt strange in his mouth. "Is that her name?" "It is one of her names," another voice said, this one coming from the insectoid being. "She has many titles. Supreme Arbitrator, Voice of the Council, Keeper of the Peace. She is one of the most important individuals in galactic civilization." Daniel looked past them to where she stood watching. "You never told me," he said to her, not caring if she could understand. The bear lizard creature, Chancellor Vorn, made a sound that might have been a laugh. "She cannot tell you anything meaningful. Her capacity to reason has clearly deteriorated. Look at her living conditions. Look at her acceptance of charity from a primitive species." "Do not call him that," a new voice said. This voice was weak but clear, translated by devices. Daniel could now see floating near the speakers. It was her voice, Keshereth, speaking for the first time in his presence. Daniel felt his knees go weak. "She speaks," he whispered. "Of course I speak," Keshereth said, her amber eyes fixed on Vorn. "I have simply chosen not to waste words on those unworthy of hearing them." Vorn's expression, alien as it was, clearly showed displeasure. "You prove my point. Matriarch, you hide in a cave. You accept food from a species that has not even achieved interstellar travel. You demonstrate no interest in your duties or your legacy. I have no duties. Keshrith replied. I retired. I chose to live my final years in peace. That choice does not indicate mental incompetence. Final years, Vorm pounced on the phrase. You speak of dying. Yet your medical scans show improvement. Why improve if you wish to die? Unless you are too confused to understand your own desires. The insectoid being, Vex, stepped forward with datapads in several appendages. Chancellor Vorn. The matriarch's improvement correlates directly with Mr. Carter's care. This demonstrates her choice to accept help is working in her favor. Or it demonstrates that she is being manipulated by a clever primitive. Vorn countered. Humans are known for their deceptive capabilities. Daniel finally found his voice again. I am not manipulating anyone. I did not even know she could talk until 30 seconds ago. Exactly, Vorn said triumphantly. You admit ignorance. How can you provide appropriate care when you do not even understand what she is? I know she was hurting, Daniel said, his voice growing stronger. I know she needed help. I know she is better now than when I found her. What else do I need to understand? You need to understand that she is not yours to care for, Vorn said coldly. She belongs under proper supervision, with medical facilities and staff who comprehend her needs. I belong to myself, Keshrith said, her voice carrying power that made several of the observers step back. I chose this place. I chose this existence. I chose to accept kindness from someone who sees me as an individual rather than a political asset. You are not thinking clearly, Vorn insisted. The Assembly has granted me authority to assess your mental competency. If you cannot pass the evaluation, you will be placed under conservatorship for your own protection. Whose protection? Keshrith asked. Mine or yours? How much of my estate have you already promised to your allies? Chancellor, the accusation hung in the storm-wet air. Daniel watched the exchange, feeling completely out of his depth, but unwilling to leave whatever was happening. She needed support. The evaluation will proceed, Vorn said. Ignoring the question, you will answer a series of questions designed to assess cognitive function. If you fail, control of your affairs will transfer to an appointed conservator. And let me guess, Vex said dryly. You have already nominated yourself for that position. I am the obvious choice. Vorn replied without shame. I have the political experience to manage her legacy properly. This is wrong. Daniel said. Everyone turned to look at him. He swallowed hard, but continued. I do not know anything about your politics or your laws. But I know that you cannot force someone to live a certain way, just because you think you know better. This does not concern you. Human, Vorn said dismissively. He has more right to speak than you do. Keshrith said. He has shown me more genuine care in 6 months than the Assembly showed in 800 years. Sentiment, Vorn waved a clawed hand. Emotion is not a substitute for proper judgment. The evaluation begins now. He pulled out a device and activated it, projecting images and text into the air between them. First question. Recite the Treaty of Kestar in its original language. That treaty has 17,000 words in a language Earth has never heard. Vex protested. The test is culturally biased. The test is standard, Vorn said. Matriarch, please begin. Keshrith looked at the projected text, then at Daniel, then back at Vorn. No, she said simply. Refusing to answer is the same as failure. Vorn warned. I am not refusing because I cannot answer. Keshrith said, I am refusing because the test is designed to measure my value to the Assembly, not my capacity to make decisions about my own life. The law does not care about your philosophical objections. Vorn said, failure to complete the assessment means automatic conservatorship. Daniel stepped forward, rain still streaming down his face. Wait, just wait. You are telling me she has to prove she is smart enough by remembering some treaty. But what about all the things she remembers about our conversations? What conversations? Warren asked. Tell him. Daniel said to Keshrith. Tell him what we talked about yesterday. Keshrith's eyes seemed to brighten. You told me about the seal pup learning to swim. How it kept getting tumbled by the waves, but kept trying. You compared it to your first attempts at surfing when you were 12 years old in California. And the day before, Daniel prompted, you read from a book about ocean currents. Chapter 7 about the Antarctic circumpolar current. You stopped twice to explain concepts you thought I might not understand, though I understood perfectly. 3 days ago, Daniel continued, you brought me apples and complained about a tourist who littered near the tide pools. You spent 15 minutes picking up trash while telling me about how humans need to take better care of their planet. Daniel turned to Vaughn. She remembers everything, every story, every conversation. How is that not proof that her mind works fine? Vaughn's expression was hard to read, but seemed less certain. Remembering conversations with one individual proves nothing. It proves she chooses to remember what matters to her, Vex said quickly, seeing the opening. The storm passed overnight, leaving the morning sky clear, and cold. Daniel had not slept. Instead, spending the night in his truck outside the cave, while alien equipment hummed and glowed around him several times. Commander Zeharan or one of his security team approached to offer him shelter in their climate-controlled stations. But Daniel refused. If they were watching Keshrith, he was watching them around dawn. Vex emerged from one of the sleek structures and walked over to Daniel's truck. The insectoid liar moved with careful deliberation, clearly trying not to appear threatening. Mr. Carter, Vex said through his translation device. May I speak with you? Daniel rolled down his window, cradling a cup of coffee he had brewed on his portable camping stove. I am listening. I need to explain what is happening, Vex said. You deserve to understand the situation fully. I am feeding someone important, and a politician wants to take control of her life. Daniel said, that is what I understood so far. Vex made a clicking sound that might have been approval. You understand more than Chancellor Vorn gives you credit for. But there is additional context you should know. Over the next 30 minutes, Vex explained Keshrith's history, 800 years of service, countless lives saved through her mediation, the weight of responsibility that had nearly crushed her. He described her wealth, estates on 17 worlds, investments that funded hospitals and schools across the galaxy. He told Daniel about the political factions that circled her retirement like scavengers, each wanting access to her resources and influence. When she came to Earth, Vex said, we thought we were arranging end-of-life care. She was dying, Mr. Carter, not from disease but from exhaustion, from the burden of being important. And then I showed up, Daniel said quietly. And then you showed up, Vex confirmed. You treated her like she was just another creature that needed help. You did not want anything from her. You just wanted her to be okay. That is because I did not know, Daniel said. Would it have changed your behavior if you had known? Vex asked. Daniel thought about it, watching the cave entrance where he could see Keshrith's outline. I do not think so, he said finally. Maybe I would have been more nervous. But she still would have needed help. That does not change based on who she used to be. That perspective is unfortunately rare in galactic civilization, Vex said. Most beings see matriarch Keshrith and calculate how they can benefit from knowing her. That sounds lonely, Daniel said. Vex's multiple eyes blinked in what might have been surprise. I had not considered it in those terms. But yes, I believe it was very lonely. So what happens now? Daniel asked. The tribunal arrives in 2 hours. Vex explained. They will assess whether the matriarch has the mental capacity to make her own decisions. If they determine she does not, Chancellor Vorn will be appointed conservator, and he will make her go back to the life that was killing her. Daniel said, most likely. Vex admitted. He will argue it is for her own good. That she needs proper care and facilities. What she needs is to be left alone. Daniel said firmly, that is what I need you to help me prove. Vex said, the tribunal will question you about your interactions with her. They will want to know if you coerced or manipulated her in any way. I brought her fish, Daniel said flatly. I talked to her. I read her stories. How is any of that manipulation? It is not, Vex said. But Vaughn will try to paint it as such. He will suggest that humans are cunning, that you identified a vulnerable alien and exploited her loneliness. That is garbage, Daniel said angrily. I agree completely, Vex said. But you must remain calm when they question you. Anger will be interpreted as defensiveness. Daniel took a deep breath. Forcing himself to relax, what do you need me to do? Tell the truth, Vex said simply. Explain how you found her. Why you helped her. What your relationship has been. The more genuine and unrehearsed you are, the better. I can do that, Daniel said. Good, Vex said, then hesitated. Mr. Carter, may I ask you a question? Sure. Why you care so much? Vex asked. You have only known her for 6 months. You thought she was just an animal. You owe her nothing. Yet you stayed through the storm. You are here now defending her. Why? Daniel was quiet for a moment, staring at his coffee. When I was a kid, he said finally. Maybe 8 or 9, I found a dog in a ditch. Old thing, half-starved, covered in fleas. Everyone said it was hopeless, that we should just put it out of its misery. He paused, remembering that my mom said that every living thing deserves someone to care whether it lives or dies. She said that being kind costs you nothing but means everything to the one receiving it. We nursed that dog back to health. He lived another 5 years, good years, and when he finally died, he was warm and fed and loved. My mom said that was all any of us could hope for in the end. Vex was silent for a long moment. Your mother sounds wise. She was. Daniel said. She died when I was 16. Cancer, but I remember what she taught me. The matriarch chose well when she chose to trust you. Vex said quietly. The sound of approaching engines interrupted them. 3 large vehicles that looked like they were designed by someone who understood aerodynamics, but not wheels appeared over the horizon. Floating above the ground. The tribunal, Vex said. Remember, stay calm, tell the truth, and trust that justice will prevail. And if it does not, Daniel asked, then we find another way, Vex said grimly. The vehicles settled near the monitoring stations, and beings of various species emerged. At the center was a tall, elegant creature with features that reminded Daniel of a deer crossed with a bird. She carried herself with obvious authority. That is Arbiter Teshka, Vex explained. She is fair but strict. She will not be swayed by emotion or politics. Only evidence. Chancellor Vorn emerged from his own shelter. Looking fresh and confident, he had spent the night preparing his case while Daniel sat in his truck. The Arbiter's assistants began setting up equipment, creating a formal space with seating areas and recording devices within 20 minutes. They had transformed the muddy clearing into something resembling a courtroom. This tribunal is convened to assess the mental competency of Matriarch Keshereth, Arbiter Teshka announced, her voice carrying clearly despite the open space. Chancellor Vorn has challenged her fitness to manage her own affairs. We will hear evidence and testimony before making our determination. Keshereth emerged from the cave. Moving with more grace than Daniel had seen before, she positioned herself in the designated area. Her head held high. Matriarch, the Arbiter said respectfully. Do you understand why we are here? I understand perfectly. Keshereth said. Chancellor Vorm believes that choosing peace over politics indicates mental deficiency. That is a simplification. Vorm protested. I believe that living in a cave and accepting charity from a primitive species indicates you are not thinking clearly. Then let us examine the evidence, Arbiter Teshka said. Chancellor Vorn. Present your case. Vorn activated his data displays, showing images of the cave, medical scans, and recorded observations. The evidence is clear, he argued. Matriarch Kesherith, one of the greatest minds in galactic history, has reduced herself to living in primitive conditions. She accepts food from a human who cannot possibly understand her needs. She shows no interest in her legacy or her responsibilities. She retired from those responsibilities. Vex interjected. Retirement does not mean abandonment of reason, Warren countered. Look at these scans. When she arrived on Earth, she was already declining. Now she has stabilized, but why? Because she is receiving proper care? No. Because a human brings her fish. He made it sound ridiculous. Furthermore, Vorn continued, she has formed an inappropriate attachment to this human, refusing proper medical care in favor of his amateur efforts. I never refused medical care, Kesherith said. I refused unwanted medical care. There is a difference. You see, Vorn said to the Arbiter. She cannot distinguish between care she needs and care she wants. Classic signs of impaired judgment. Arbiter Teshka turned to Vex. Defense. Your response. Vex stood, his multiple limbs holding various data pads. The prosecution's argument rests on the assumption that unconventional choices indicate incompetence. This is false logic. He brought up his own displays, showing Kesherith's improved health metrics. The matriarch's condition has improved precisely because she made the choice to accept Mr. Carter's help. This demonstrates sound judgment, not impairment, or it demonstrates luck. Vorn said, she stumbled into beneficial circumstances without understanding them. Then let us ask the one person who can clarify. Vex said. He turned to Daniel. Mr. Carter, please come forward. Daniel stood on shaky legs, very aware that he was the only human in a gathering of alien beings deciding the fate of his friend, Mr. Carter. Arbiter Teshka said, you have been caring for Matriarch Kesherith for 6 months. Is that correct? Yes, ma'am, Daniel said. Then wondered if ma'am was appropriate for an alien. Describe your first encounter. She requested. Daniel took a breath and began. He told him about the storm damage inspection, finding her in the cave, thinking she was dying. He described the decision to bring food, the gradual building of trust, the routine that developed. I just wanted to help. He said simply, I did not know she was important. I just knew she was hurting. And when did you realize she was intelligent? The Arbiter asked right away. Daniel said, I mean, I did not know she could talk or that she was from space or anything. But I could see it in her eyes. She understood things. Arbiter Teshka stood silent for a long moment, her bird-like features giving away nothing of her thoughts. The assembled observers waited, the only sound being the distant crash of waves against the cliffs. Chancellor Vorn, she said finally, your evidence shows that Matriarch Kesherith chose an unconventional retirement. This is not disputed, however. Unconventional choices are not in themselves evidence of incompetence. But Arbiter, Vorn protested, she is living in a cave she selected, Teshka said, on a planet she researched and chose, accepting help from an individual whose character she assessed accurately. These are not the actions of an impaired mind. She turned to address everyone present. I have reviewed the medical scans. The matriarch's cognitive function is not only intact, but shows improvement since her arrival on Earth. Her memory is perfect, her reasoning sound. Her choices, while unusual, are consistent with someone seeking peace after centuries of service. This is outrageous, Vorn said. She is wasting away with a primitive. She's recovering with a friend. Vex countered. Arbiter Teshka raised a hand for silence. I am not finished. Mr. Carter, your testimony has been enlightening. You treated matriarch Keshereth with dignity and compassion without knowledge of her status. This suggests either remarkable instinct or remarkable character. I just did what felt right. Daniel said. Precisely, Teshka said. You acted on empathy rather than calculation. The matriarch's choice to trust you demonstrates her judgment was sound, not impaired. She pulled up a holographic display showing complex legal text. Furthermore, the law is clear on this matter. Retirement from public service does not require maintenance of previous lifestyle. Citizens have the right to choose their living conditions provided those conditions do not endanger themselves or others. Living in a cave endangered her health. Vaughan argued. Her health was already failing when she arrived, Dr. Kelm interjected. Speaking for the first time, the cave did not cause her decline. The burden of her former life did. Removing that burden, combined with Mr. Carter's care, allowed her system to stabilize. Medical opinion supports the conclusion that the matriarch's choices have been beneficial, Teshka noted. Therefore, I find no evidence of mental incompetence. No, Bourne said sharply. I invoke the right to challenge. Demand a formal cognitive assessment. Very well, Teshka said. Matriarch Keshereth. Are you willing to undergo evaluation? Keshereth looked at Daniel. Then, back at the Arbiter, I will answer questions, but only if they are relevant to my capacity to make personal decisions, not my ability to recite political treaties. I no longer have any obligation to remember. Fair terms. Teshka agreed. She pulled up a different display. This one showing scenarios and questions. Scenario 1. You are offered 2 retirement locations. One is a luxury estate with full staff and medical facilities. The other is a remote cave with no amenities. Which do you choose and why? The cave, Keshereth said without hesitation. The luxury estate comes with observers, staff who report on my condition. Visitors who want favors. The cave offers solitude, which is what I require to heal. Scenario 2. A stranger offers you food daily. What is your assessment of their motivation? Initially, I suspected ulterior motives, Keshereth said. However, observation of the individual's behavior, consistency of care without requests for reciprocation, and genuine concern for my welfare led me to conclude the motivation was altruistic. How did you reach this conclusion? Teshka asked. I listened to his words and watched his actions. He spoke to me as a friend, not a resource. He brought supplies based on weather forecasts and seasonal changes. Demonstrating planning and care, he researched reptile nutrition to improve my diet. Showing dedication without expertise. These behaviors are inconsistent with exploitation. Vaughan shifted uncomfortably. The assessment was clearly not going as he planned. Scenario 3. Teshka continued. Political factions seek to control your estate and influence. How do you respond? I established legal trusts before retirement, Keshereth said. My estate is already allocated to charitable causes, educational institutions, and medical research. No individual can claim it because there is nothing to claim. My will is filed, witnessed, and legally binding. Vex clicked approvingly. He had helped draft that will himself. You planned your retirement carefully, Teshka observed. I spent 2 years planning, Keshereth confirmed. I considered locations, legal protections, and potential challenges. Earth was selected because humans are not yet part of galactic politics, meaning I could exist here without political complications. Until now, Daniel muttered. Sareth's eyes seemed to smile. Until now, she agreed. Arbiter Teshka reviewed her notes, then looked directly at Chancellor Vaughan. Chancellor, unless you have additional evidence of impairment, I am prepared to rule. Vaughan's expression showed he knew he had lost. But he was not finished fighting. The human has clearly influenced her, he said. His presence has altered her behavior. That influence could be considered a form of manipulation. By that logic, Vex said, every friendship is manipulation. Every relationship is coercion. The Chancellor's argument reduces to absurdity, Mr. Carter, Teshka said. Has Matriarch Keshrith ever refused your help or asked you to leave? Daniel thought back over 6 months of mornings. Sometimes she does not want to eat right away, he said. Sometimes. She seems tired and I leave earlier. She lets me know what she wants. I pay attention. And have you ever pressured her to accept anything she did not want? No, ma'am, Daniel said. If she did not want something, I would not give it to her. That is not how respect works. Teshka made a final notation on her display. I have reached my decision. Matriarch Keshrith has demonstrated clear cognitive function, sound reasoning, and the capacity to make informed decisions about her own life. Furthermore, her choice to accept assistance from Mr. Carter has proven beneficial to her health and well-being. She turned to Vorn, Chancellor. Your challenge is denied. The matriarch retains full control of her affairs. This tribunal is concluded. Vorn looked like he wanted to argue further. But Arbiter Teshka's authority was final. He gathered his materials with jerky, angry movements. This is not over, he said to Keshrith. The Assembly will hear about this irregularity. The Assembly can hear whatever you wish to tell them, Keshrith said calmly, but they cannot change the law to suit your ambitions. Vorn left without another word, his assistants scrambling to follow as the tribunal began to pack up their equipment. Daniel felt the tension drain from his body. He had not realized how scared he had been. Mr. Carter, Arbiter Teshka approached him. May I speak with you privately? Sure, Daniel said, following her a short distance from the others. What you did for the matriarch, Teshka said, was remarkable. You helped her without knowledge of who she was, without expectation of reward. This is rare even among species that have been part of galactic civilization for millennia. I just did not want her to die alone, Daniel said. That simple compassion may have saved one of our greatest leaders, Teshka said. But there are complications now. Earth is not yet formally contacted. Your knowledge of galactic civilization creates a situation we must address. Daniel felt his stomach drop. Are you going to make me forget? We could, Teshka admitted. But I believe that would be wrong. Instead, I am going to recommend that the Assembly accelerate Earth's contact timeline. Your species shows potential that we did not fully appreciate. Because I fed someone fish, Daniel said incredulously. Because you saw suffering and responded with kindness, Teshka corrected. That trait is more valuable than technology or military strength. It suggests humanity may have much to teach us. She handed him a small device. This is a communicator. In the coming months, you will be contacted by our diplomatic corps. They will want to learn more about human culture and values. You will be compensated for your time. Of course, I do not need compensation, Daniel said. Nevertheless, you will receive it, Teshka said. Consider it payment for the fish you brought. She smiled, which on her species involved a complex arrangement of facial features. Take care of her. Mr. Carter, the galaxy owes her peace, and apparently, you are the one who can provide it. After Teshka left, Daniel walked back to where Keshrith waited. Most of the aliens were packing up. Though Vex and Commander Jiren approached Mr. Carter, Vex said, we will be maintaining our monitoring station, but at a greater distance. The matriarch has requested privacy. We will also be purchasing this land, Commander Jiren added, creating a protected zone around the cave. Your access will be unrestricted, of course. You are buying the whole park? Daniel asked. Shocked. Only the sections necessary to ensure security, Jiren said. Your job will not be affected. We have already spoken with your supervisors. They believe we are a conservation group, which is technically true. Vex said, "We are conserving the matriarch's well-being." After they left, Daniel sat down on his usual rock near the cave and Transkessereth settled beside him, closer than she usually came. "So," Daniel said, "you are kind of a big deal." "I was," Keshereth corrected. "Now I'm just someone who enjoys fresh salmon and stories about seals." "Are you going to stay?" Daniel asked. Now that everyone knows where you are. This is my home now." Keshereth said, "If you will still have me, I will still bring you breakfast every morning." Daniel promised, "Though I might start buying